Buenas tardes. I'm pleased to introduce President of Costa Rica, Mr. Carlos Alvarado, who is here to my nearest to me. To his right is Minister Svenja Schulze, Federal Minister for Environment, Nature Conservation, and Nuclear Safety from Germany. To Mr. Alvarado's left is Governor of California, Gavin Newsom. And to his left is Mayor of Barcelona and co-president of UCLG, Ms. Ada Colau. They will have brief introductory remarks, and then if we have time, they'll answer some questions. Mr. President, please.
Hi to everybody, and I want to appreciate the occasion to share some remarks on mobility, on work, and several other issues that are for all of us relevant. I want to say one bit of information about Costa Rica. Currently, our electric grid is 99.5% clean and renewable. So that's a great opportunity. We've built that in the past decades. What's our challenge now? Our challenge now is to plug that clean electric grid into transportation and change our whole mobility. Because still, 70% of our energy consumption is fossil fuels. The other 30% of our energy consumption is electricity, which is clean. But if we plug that grid and increase our usage of electricity in transportation, we'll manage to dramatically reduce our carbon footprint. But that's all about changing transportation. So what are we doing? We're building 2 electric trains, 1 cargo train from the center of the Costa Rica to the Caribbean, and an urban train which is going to be electric. It's going to be the main source of consumption of electricity from the whole country, that train. And also rearrange the whole bus system to be in cars with that electric train. We also pass a law that eliminates periodically the taxes on electric vehicles, buses and cars to be part of this. But at the end, we're incentivizing people to use their bicycles and to walk, which is even better than that. And we've managed to see that that improves the quality of life, the quality of people that are on work. We recently approved this year a teleworking law. That means schemes for people to work from their homes as well to reduce emissions. And that also increases their quality of life. They have more time with their family, more time to exercise, more time to walk or do other things. So those are a bit, in a nutshell, things that we are doing on mobility, on sustainability, but also on for the life of the people in Costa Rica. And we wanted to share in this short panel. And I thank you, and I thank for the other panelists because they are true inspiration for what we're doing in your countries and in your cities. Thank you.
Mr. Schulze. Ladies and gentlemen, cities are and their population are really growing, and we estimate that in 2050, around 2/3 of our population will live in cities. And so it is really important that we take action on the cities and make them climate friendly. And that means that we have to invest in infrastructure. Cities are now responsible for about 75% of all energy-related CO2 emissions. And 1/3 can be tackled by the cities by themselves. 1/3 can't be tackled by the national governments. And 1/3 we need to tackle by working together and have a joint action. For this reason, Germany has led a coalition of governments, of development banks, of international finance institutions, of climate funds, of city network and think tanks to create LUCI. LUCI means the Leadership for Urban Climate Investment. That's the initiative, Leadership for Urban Climate Investment. And members of LUCI are for example, the World Bank, the European Investment Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, the global governance of mayors or countries like France, like Japan, like Luxembourg, UK, Mexico, Cameroon, just to name a few of that. And I'm really very proud to stand here on behalf of this coalition. And I would like to use this opportunity to thank all of our partners for this great work done so far. Lucy will be announced this afternoon, official by Werner Hoyer, by the president of the European Investment Bank. Lucy is a truly transformative framework initiative that will dramatically scale up and speed up urban climate finance. We need money for these cities, and that is really important. In a nutshell, these are Lucy's main objectives: strengthen the capacity of 2,000 cities in project preparation, make 1,000 climate-smart urban infrastructure projects bankable and financed, and linking 100 climate-smart urban projects to a financing mechanism. That's very important. And we want to introduce a tracking methodology for subnational climate finance. And last but not least, strengthen national enabling frameworks and the capacity of development banks to support climate-friendly urban projects. How do we achieve this? Lucy combines a number of new and existing initiatives and to respond to cities' need for every step along the project preparation and invest in value chains. To help to achieve that, Germany intends to provide up to 63 million euros to key initiatives under Lucy. One core element of Lucy is a new Cities Climate Finance Gap Fund that is very important and gets 50 million euros from Germany and from Luxembourg and is planned to raise to more than 100 million grants. The reformed and relaunched City Climate Finance Leadership Alliance is another very important thing. And the third is that my ministry intends to further increase its support for urban infrastructure projects by up to 20 million euros. That is another new program, and we call it Felicity 2, Eastern Partnership and Central Elysian, administered jointly by GEZ and EIB. You see a lot of women names, Felicity, Lucy. I think that's important, women empowerment here. So I thank God to all the partners who make that possible, and I think it's a really important initiative.
Thank you. Thank you. And unfortunately, we know that the president needs to leave. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Okay, and Governor?
California is the tentpole of America's climate policy. In the absence of federal leadership, in the abdication of leadership, and with the withdrawal of leadership at the federal level, California is asserting itself. We have stepped into the debate in more meaningful ways than any other time in our state's history. Our state, as you know, is the fifth largest economy in the world, $3 trillion a year economy. It's the nation's largest and most diverse economy. And we are radically changing the way we produce and consume energy, low carbon, green growth. The decarbonization efforts predate my time in life. They go back to the early 1940s, 1943. On September 8th, 1943, it was called Black Wednesday in Los Angeles. Smog. People's eyes were tearing up. They talked about literally paint peeling off cars because of the intensity of the pollution in the Los Angeles basin. As a consequence, California decided to assert itself. The business community led those efforts at the time. Republican administrations from Governor Ronald Reagan, 1967, adopted strategies, creation of the Air Resources Board, the Air Quality Act. Richard Nixon codified those efforts in 1970, President Nixon, through the Clean Air Act. Bipartisan leadership over the course of a half century, now at peril as it relates to the headwinds coming out of Washington, D.C. California's success is America's success as it relates to climate change. Mother Nature in California has joined the conversation. It's not an abstract question. It's a reality. Severe droughts, severe flooding, historic wildfires that have generated international headlines. We're a coastal state, 1,000 miles of coast, a mountainous state, year-round fire season. We have a deep sense of vulnerability and a deep sense of the reality of this crisis that doesn't loom, it persists and exists. So we are asserting ourselves at a scale no other state in America is asserting, fully functioning cap-and-trade program, building collaboratives and partnerships at the subnational level. As we pulled away from Paris, California led a coalition, now 220 subnational organizations that have convened to commit to the Paris protocols or beyond. We're asserting ourselves on 100% renewable energy goals. 5 million is our goal for electric vehicles in the state of California. We already have 43 to 46, depending on you analyze it, percent of all the electric vehicle sales already in the United States, and we're outperforming in green energy jobs, and I'll close with that. This is not an economic burden, it's an economic imperative. We recognize the genius of and versus the tyranny of or. It's not one or the other. As we detoxify and decarbonize our economy is flourishing, outperforming the United States of America in GDP growth, historically low unemployment rates, net job creation. We have now 5 to 1, 5 times as many green energy jobs as we do fossil fuel jobs in the state of California, roughly half of America's green tech venture capital. We're starting to export in this space in ways that we only could hope for and many could only imagine. So I just want to paint a picture of soberness as it relates to what is not happening in Washington, D.C., but optimism about what is happening at the local level, not just at states, but substantively as it relates to the work at the local level, cities and municipalities and metros. Remarkable things are happening. Gives me optimism about our fate and future that we share together.
Mayor?
Thank you. We have translation, so I will speak in Spanish. Muchas gracias a Naciones Unidas por invitar.
Thank you very much to the United Nations for inviting the city of Barcelona, and also as the co-president of the network of cities for us. It is really important to be here today. Thank you so much to my colleagues for sharing their high-level experiences with me. And thank you very much for the invitation to this summit. We were just in the GA Hall, and Secretary General Guterres presented the climate summit as a summit of action. I think this is very relevant. He said, we're not here to make speeches or negotiate. We're here to act. And cities like to act. We are very practical, and more so, we host most of the world's population, and that's why we see many challenges. As the minister from Germany was saying, most emissions come from cities, more than 70%. Therefore, unfortunately, we are the protagonists of the problem, but we especially want to be protagonists of the solutions, and that is why we are working and we are acting. In Barcelona, for example, I'm going to share some concrete actions. I think that's why we were invited here. We've approved an ambitious climate plan, and we haven't just worked at an institutional level. We've been working with social movements and with experts, and it's been a very wide participatory municipal process, and it's been recognized as one of the best municipal plans in Europe. Our proposal is to cut emissions by 45% by 2030 and be a carbon-neutral city by 2050. I'm not going to talk about the details of the plan, but I would like to point out some key elements in terms of mobility, energy rehabilitation, and waste management. Of course, we need to get many cars out of cities. Electric cars are not enough. We need to get rid of our cars, and we need to promote alternatives. Public transportation, for example. riding bicycles. And of course, we need to take back our streets. They need to be for pedestrians. Streets are for living. We have an initiative that is famous, our super blocks, and we've been recovering these neighborhoods. They're for the community. And streets where we had too many cars are now full of children playing, of green spaces, older people going on walks, and spaces for living, because that is what we want our cities to be. And of course, the energy issue is key, and we depend on state policies or even supranational policies, but we are not going to be satisfied with this. In Barcelona, we have a public energy metropolitan authority. It's the biggest one in all of Spain, and we sell 100% green energy to families, and therefore we have an alternative policy to the oligopoly that was speculating with something that is so basic and so important like energy. And zero waste. Recycling is not enough. We need to drastically reduce waste, and for this we're implementing many actions, and I don't want to speak for too long, so I'll wrap up. Next January in 2020, our climate plan will reach an important point. All of Barcelona will be a low emissions area. We are going to prohibit the circulation of many cars that pollute, and we will decree a climate emergency. We thought it was extremely important that this climate emergency decree wasn't just a piece of paper or rhetoric, but we thought we needed concrete actions to really change things, because otherwise our people won't believe in our public policies, because our people, as Greta explained, are sick and tired of hearing promises and empty words. They want action. They want real action with commitment, and they want a practical impact. And I would like to wrap up with a thought for you. Cities, as the minister said, are part of the problem, but we must be part of the solution. And she also mentioned that we are underfinanced, totally underfinanced. We have almost no normative competency. We have no direct access to funding, and we are there on the front lines to fight this climate emergency. So we really need to think about this. We need to be fast. There's no time to waste, and states need to understand that we are not a minor administration. We are local government, and we want to be allies. We want to help. We want to cooperate, and therefore we need to share that governance at the local level and at the global level, to craft strategies that the planet needs right now. We want to be part of the solution, and we want for states to rely on us, not just to invite us on off chances to international summits, but we want to be an everyday partner. We want to access that funding for infrastructure, public transportation, renewables, all of those things that we really need in urban spaces, and we need them urgently. And therefore, we want to work in our network of cities where we have few resources, but we are very practical, and we're used to cooperating instead of competing. We're trying to feminize politics from the ground up. We hope that's sexy, and we hope that becomes trendy at a global level soon. And we invite states to join us in this movement through this international network. And tomorrow, we're actually celebrating the Forum for Local Government. It will be the second time we meet, and for us it's so important to have the second opportunity to meet with states, with the United Nations, to really ramp up Agenda 2030. An agenda, and I will wrap up with this, cannot stop at a single colored pin. We want these colors to represent real concrete actions, and we want citizens to believe in our proposals, and we want the UN to be a true leader. And to lead, you have to earn the trust and credibility of people through action. So, taking up Guterres' words and Greta's speech, which I think moved us deeply, because hearing her speak right there, her words and where she was coming from was so powerful. It's an entire generation that is really disappointed and angry because they have to act like adults in front of the actual adults. As Greta was saying, and the movements that she represents, and she represents many movements, it's not enough to just put patches on the system. We have to rethink an economic system that isn't working, and the system needs to change, not the planet. And Barcelona and the network want to be allies to do this as soon as possible. Thank you.
And now we have time for a few questions. I'm going to start over there, please. If you could please say your name and your media outlet.
Here now? Okay. Julia Piper with Green Tech Media and Political Climate from the Schwarzenegger Institute, a podcast. A question for the governor. So you mentioned this morning and again here about the economic potential of clean energy and fighting climate change, and California is an example of that. But not every state feels that way, and certainly unions in, say, coal-producing states are pushing back, saying, what's their future look like? And so I know you're not president of the country, but what would you say to those states that don't see the opportunity the way California does? And so that's creating political tension. So part one is, how do you bring other states along? Part two is, how do you overcome the political gridlock? Is this going to have to be fought out, or is there still room for reason and conversation?
Yeah. Both outstanding questions. I'll try to be as succinct in the interest of time as I possibly can. I think the answer to the question is power of emulation. Success leaves clues. And I think it's one thing to assert something, it's another to prove it. California is proving the paradigm of economic growth. At the same time, we are reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. So I think that's most important. It's not theoretical for us. It's very pragmatic. And we recognize where the future is, and we want to invest in the future. If you don't invest in the future, you're not going to do very well there. And so I think the trend lines are self-evident, and I would encourage those governors in those states, legislative leaders, to recognize and reconcile that future in the context of their own policies and planning. Number two, the issue of partisanship. It's not lost on me from the Schwarzenegger Institute. Arnold Schwarzenegger was the principal author, at least he was the governor that signed AB 32, our landmark cap and trade legislation, in the spirit of Ronald Reagan, in the spirit of Richard Nixon. This used to be completely nonpartisan. George H.W. Bush, cap and trade, ozone issues, the Montreal Protocols. We had leaders of both parties. What the hell has happened to us? And I just think that needs to be called out. I married into a big Republican family. They care deeply about the environment, care about their kids and grandkids, clean air, clean water. And I would just encourage us to look beyond the moment and beyond the current administration and to consider the trajectory of bipartisanship rather, on this issue historically. And that should give us some, I think, confidence that the trend line ultimately will occur in our favor.
In Los Angeles. But I was wondering, the representative from Germany was speaking a lot about some alternative transportation means, and I was wondering in California if there was an investment being made in, I don't know, electric trains. I know in Los Angeles we've been making really big investment in metro and whatnot, and I was wondering if you could speak on that, Governor.
The most significant investment is over $20 billion that's being invested for phase one of a high-speed rail system that will be the first fully functioning high-speed rail, at least in the Central Valley of the state of California. Ultimately, the goal is to get it to Southern California, into L.A., Anaheim area, and up into San Francisco, into the Sacramento area. But that project is underway. That project's under construction, and that first phase is financed. So that's the most significant investment at scale, billions and billions of dollars. Beyond that, you're in the Los Angeles area, which is really led in terms of capturing sales tax revenue and capturing that revenue in real time so they can make historic investments in light rail and alternative means of transportation. But I think broadly, and I'll close with this, I don't want to take up any more time, I think the whole mobility sector is completely being reorganized. I think 5 or 10 years, we won't be asking a question like that. I think the whole issue of mobility with autonomy, different spacing technology, what we're doing already, we just signed legislation myself last week as it relates to the platooning of autonomous trucks coming out of our ports and airports. I mean, the world is radically changing, and mobility as a sector is changing, particularly as it electrifies.
Dimitri Lascaris from the Real News Network in Baltimore. Governor Newsom, your stated commitment to deal responsibly with the climate crisis seems a little bit difficult to reconcile with drilling data, which indicates that there's a 20% increase in oil drilling in California this year compared to 2018. how is your state dealing with the extractive sector, and also the fact that it's got 15 refineries and it's by far the largest refiner of oil in Western North America?
As you know well, we were the third largest producer of oil, now sixth, and we are moving to transition not just our vehicle fleet from a demand perspective, but on a supply perspective. You may have noted in our budget the first time we've ever submitted investment to look to organize in a very deliberative and pragmatic way that transition, not only as it relates to oil and gas, but different strategies to make sure the workforce is protected in that process. So $3 million was set aside in this budget to begin that focus and transition. And you also may be aware of the number of fracking permits that has declined over the course of the last number of months as we're changing management and governance at Dogger and beginning the process of having a very sober look at the future of the fossil fuel industry in the state of California, but doing it in a way where we don't leave communities behind and we don't do damage, not just the economy, but damage to our promotion and promise of inclusion.
And sorry, I'm told this is the last question.
Sorry, guys. Forgive me. Yeah. Forgive us.
No, the UN, not the US.
I'm with you. All right.
Just have an immigrant family if it helps. It does. I'm running for the New York Post business section. Have you been approached internationally, or what kind of conversations have you had internationally about models of federalism? Since we're looking at now cases where we have a democratic backsliding in the West, and also we're seeing struggles within the United States over environmental codes and whatnot. Have you been having conversations that track together about the environment and about democracy around the world with models of federalism to take away centralized power?
Well, I'm worried about federalism in the United States, just from a domestic perspective. I mean, the irony, federalism was alive and well in the 60s in California as it relates to our efforts on clean air and that waiver that the Trump administration is trying to remove from California. 10th Amendment, states' rights. It's ironic that the current administration is pushing back against federalism and states' rights at a time when this country desperately needs the leadership of not just California, but other states that are in the future business. As it relates to federalism more broadly defined internationally, I'll leave that to representatives from the United Nations.
Okay, and I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Thank you very much.